The best podcast listening app in the world is here. It's called Podopolo. Visit podopolo.com. Download the app. Mention Mr. Action when you sign up for a free account and start listening right now. That's Podopolo.com.
This is Life Transformation Radio. Prepare to engage. Seatbelt activated. Download initiated. Your quantum journey of transformation begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Life Transformation Radio. Hi, I'm Rob Actis, best-selling author of The Law of Action, voice actor, business mindset coach, the podcast whisperer, and Mr. Action himself. Here at Life Transformation Radio, we are committed to share more about real life, love, the power of positivity, romance, and of course, laughter. We care about helping others find their internal drive and purpose. We celebrate life's challenges and overcoming them. On the show, my guests are amazing people who are forces for good in the world around them and live a life of transformation. My guest today does just that. Melinda Wittstock is a 5-time serial entrepreneur in media tech, and she's busy revolutionizing podcasting as the CEO and founder of Podopolo, the interactive and AI-powered podcast app that makes discovery effortless, listening personalized, and social and podcasting profitable for creators. Belinda is also the host of the acclaimed Wings of Inspired Business podcast, ranked by Entrepreneur Magazine as number 8 of its top 20 podcasts in 2020. She's a former award-winning journalist. She's also a former executive producer and host for many of the world's top media brands, including BBC de CNBC and Financial Times. She's a conscious leader with a dedicated spiritual practice who believes entrepreneurs can and must use business for social good. And she certainly has lived a life of transformation. Hi, Melinda. Welcome to Life Transformation Radio.
Hey, Rob, it's great to be with you. I'm so excited.
You know, you're back again. You were a guest before, and we were talking about Podopolo and your transformation, and things have really transformed. So for those of you that haven't had a chance to listen to the previous episode, I'd like to talk about really your transformation from being in broadcasting to now being the CEO of a very successful, and it's going to be an overnight success tech company, which is Podopolo.
Oh, gosh, Rob. So it's a long story. Of course, transformation is one of these things that doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of reasons why people talk about spirituality as a practice. And I happen to think that entrepreneurship has got to be one of the most spiritual things you can do because it challenges every fiber of your being. Think for a moment of stepping into a whirlwind of constant change, lots of things around you that you cannot control. Some things you can. You can, control yourself, be the best you can be, but it's constant uncertainty. And one of the things that people talk about as being the most stressful thing that they can ever put themselves into is change, constant change. Yeah. Change is stressful. But as an entrepreneur, you need to reformat your mindset to love change, accept it. And what happens is as you're growing a company, I happen to think the only way you can really grow a company, especially one that's changing something, one that requires a change in behavior or people to do something completely new or challenges people to think differently, the entrepreneur has to be prepared for, a challenging journey. And so it challenges. And what I've found is every time that you get triggered by something or every time you feel a sense of fear or every time that there's something outside of your comfort zone, that's where the growth is happening. And I've kind of learned just to be grateful for all of those things. I never really know what's coming next. But entrepreneurship is something that's going to throw every single limiting belief you've ever had, every single subconscious driver that's not necessarily working for you. It's going to throw all that stuff in your face. And your challenge should you choose to accept it, is to figure out how to alchemize all of those things in yourself as you grow your company.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things is, so you went from being in the broadcast space and being a serial entrepreneur, but what was the transformation like to go from, I have this idea and I'm going to disrupt the industry. I'm going to create a podcast app that's going to really revolutionize things for podcast listeners and for podcasters. So there had to have been some really deep thought and meditation. And, how did you transform into what it is today? Because it was just an idea and you created it and it's happening.
100%. So I wish I could say there was one eureka moment. There were a couple along the way, but really it's been a long process. So I've always been an entrepreneur. I mean, I was the kid that went door to door with my black lab at age 6, demanding that people prepay for my show. And I came home with $100 and I asked my dad, where we could find 100 shares. You know what I mean? So this has always been just who I am.
Right.
Was entrepreneurial all through high school, all through college, created the advertising department for my daily student newspaper as I was the editor-in-chief of it. This has been long in progress. And so I happen to think that I am a unique person at a unique moment in time to come up with something like Podopolo, because it's really the sum or the convergence really of my life experience. Whether being a media correspondent of the Times of London and writing about this new thing called the internet and interviewing Steve Jobs or Ted Turner or Richard Branson, through to creating my own media companies, first across broadcasting with a unique way of repurposing content at scale and serving 3 million people a day with a political news agency that was heard on 300 radio stations, commercial television stations, increasingly digital properties, as well as newspapers, through to really getting excited about technology and how technology could really move the needle in media and the very beginnings of social media, and then really being understanding what a lot of the problems were with social media that's led our society to such discord, with all the trolling and the disinformation and the outrage culture and the cancel culture and all those things that are really wrong with a technology that was actually very promising. And along the way, I've not only created award-winning content, but I've also created really game-changing algorithms to be able to personalize content at scale, to be able to actually understand the veracity of the content. Weirdly, one of my startups years ago, like a decade ago, was solving the fake news problem before we even knew we had one algorithmically. So I've always been at that kind of bleeding edge about how technology can really improve our dialogue, our discourse, the way we learn, the way we understand and process information. So this has always been kind of my life's work. So somewhere along the line, I created a podcast. It was back in 2017. And I really wanted the podcast that I'd always wished that I had coming up as a female founder in a very male-dominated space, technology. And I looked around and there was really nothing for me. So I created it myself, a typical kind of entrepreneur. How hard could this be? And I launched my podcast. And I learned very quickly that there were a lot of structural problems that were preventing podcasters from making money from their podcast, let alone being discovered, growing their reach, growing their revenue. I mean, I just experienced it myself. And I was coming at it with all this marketing expertise, award-winning content expertise, technological expertise, and it was still really hard. And I thought, oh God, there's got to be a better way. At the same time, I noticed that podcasting was the fastest growing media of all time. I noticed that podcasting was that way because of its inherent intimacy, like its capacity for great storytelling, the ability to connect with people in a really authentic way that could elevate them. And I thought, wow, I looked around. Nobody was combining the technology to allow a much more personalized experience, a much better listening experience, a connected experience where I think that the best content is conversation. And meanwhile, you had podcasters, not making money from it. So it was really an evolution to get to that point. And this is my I would say this is my fifth adult business, like serious business. I've grown several to 7 and 8 figure success. I've had an exit, that kind of thing. And it seemed like the timing was right. The solution was right. The combining of all of these things to create a business that aligned with me and my spiritual practice, because I believe that the best businesses are ones that leave the world better than how they found it, right, that really illuminate, elevate, empower people, and are abundance-based business models where everybody wins, no matter who is involved, whether it's an advertiser, a listener, a viewer, a podcaster, a vendor, a team member. And so it is, in a word, it's convergence. And, there were some aha moments along the way. There always are, because you learn as you start building it, you start connecting with your customers and getting their feedback and really understanding in tremendous and more minute depth what the problem is you're actually solving for them. And we're solving quite a few.
Absolutely. So what is one thing that you can share of getting into the mindset to go on a journey of creating something that hasn't been created before and to disrupt an industry?
Well, this is very much in the realm of inspiration, Rob. Years ago, it's kind of a funny story. I used to have, like a lot of people, a to-do list, all these things I thought I had to do, living a life of shoulds, like I should do this, I must do this, and my list was never done. There was a certain point where I picked up meditation and, other techniques like visualization and affirmations, the beginning of that journey. But it was in the meditation of really learning, finally, because I'm like you, I'm a person of action, how to actually quiet my mind enough to give my mind space to connect not only with my own intuition, but with what I would call divine inspiration. And I think it's in those moments where all my best inspirations, divine downloads, whatever you call them, happen. And increasingly, I've learned to do that. So I now have an inspiration list that comes off my, my morning meditation, or it could happen when I'm walking the dog or walking along the beach or lifting weights or doing yoga or whatever it is that I'm doing. Right. I have these moments of just being increasingly in touch with those. Now, of course, that's not enough. You then have to go into action. So it's really a mix of that, really developing that muscle of that right brain, intuition, empathy, not questioning yourself, really understanding the difference between, say, being nagged by a fear or knowing that it's a true inspiration. And then using your left brain to go out and get the data and validate it and put it into practice. And those two things, that left brain, right brain balance, or analytic, inspirational, is always the line that I'm walking.
Well, I love story and I love hearing how things occurred. So as you created Podopolo, unless you live in an incredible space of reality with your family and your friends, there's always the dream stealers. They're like, yeah, that's kind of a dumb. You can't compete against Apple. You can't compete against Spotify, or, I'm sure you've had other success, so they believe in you. But how does one, when you're doing something of such magnitude and such passion about it, how do you overcome the dream stealers that are out there? And they're out there everywhere. Or they're like, oh yeah, I was going to do that. That was my idea, but you go ahead and do it. And what mindset does it take for you to push through all that? Because I'm sure that it's not easy. And you had to have had dream stealers when you started this and saying that you're going to compete against.
All my life. I was even married to one. So, you really got to surround yourself with people that 100% are dedicated to helping you be the best you can be. and being sounding boards, but being constructive sounding boards and really helping you through any of those doubts. I often like to think that what other people think of me is none of my business.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Woo, yeah. Absolutely.
and that's the only way you can really navigate through it. I think with those sorts of things in a way for me, because I think I'm kind of naturally quite competitive. I'm a former athlete, in my younger years, I'm very competitive with myself. So if I see a challenge, it doesn't immediately tell me, oh, I can't do that. It prompts, how can I do that?
Let's try that. Yeah. I think you and I are very similar that way. Like, yeah, let's do that.
Right. Because as an entrepreneur, in full, frankness, I mean, we're building the plane as we're flying it. Right.
Yeah.
and you're going to fail like multiple times along the way. And one of the things I talk with all these amazing female founders, who built 7, 8, 9-figure, in some cases, unicorn billion-dollar businesses on my own podcast. We talk about the need to overcome perfectionism, and to destigmatize the concept of failure, because failure is a constant in entrepreneurship. And it's really important to kind of alchemize that failure, in fact, is just feedback. It's another data point, and how not to take it personally, because it's not about you, the human being, or your soul or anything. You are like a scientist. You're in a lab with a series of hypotheses, and you keep testing them, measuring them, building, trying different ways or whatever. Most of the time, if you can persevere in that and actually be a really good listener and really being able to synthesize information and all the input that you're getting, and that you're in alignment with yourself and your own, I like to call it soul purpose, SOUL purpose in life, things come together. It's not easy. There are all kinds of times with Podopolo where I've been like, how on earth are we going to find the money for payroll this week? Right? Just sort of heart-wrenching things like that, where you feel so much responsibility for your team. And somehow things kind of work out. So there's this kind of, maybe it's a completely irrational belief. So someone looking at this purely from their rational mind would think someone like me is like bonkers, like flat out crazy. But the best entrepreneurs, the people who really do amazing things that, as Steve Jobs used to say, dent the universe, are just a little bit crazy. Because there are so many other things that I could have done in my life that would have made me infinitely richer than I am now, certainly a more stable or higher standard of living. And on the other hand, this is my mission. This is just what I'm here to do. And I'm just in acceptance with that. So there's going to be ups and downs and bumps and things along the way. But I guess I love the learning in that. I'm endlessly curious. I you know what I mean? I just want to make a difference in people's lives and be in service to people. And that's what this is.
I love that. Well, one of the things that I love to do as well is to make a difference in people's lives and to really amplify voices. And, I have my podcasts and my speaking and my other stuff that I do, my voiceovers, and I have actually shifted gears and come on as the Podopolo evangelist of podcasting and bringing on new podcasters into the app, because it's such an incredible program right now that it is giving podcasters that don't have a giant platform a voice. And they've been hidden and suppressed. And it's with such passion that I do that. And it's, I've been around with you guys for a long time and now coming on officially with you at Podopolo. And it's a wonderful thing. It's exciting to see how everything is evolving, but also how exciting these podcasters are getting about being part of Podopolo. And that it's a transformation for their lives, because a lot of them thought that no one's ever going to listen to their podcast. That's just pretty much what they thought. And now with the recommendation engine and the AI that's back behind it, it's going to push their content to people that they didn't even know they existed. They don't have to be the top 50 podcasts like the other platforms of Spotify or Apple have, where you do a search. It's going to be much more organic. And that's something that I really love, is the fact that Podopolo is giving podcasters a home, and it's giving them an opportunity to really amplify their message. Because that's the one thing that I love about podcasting, is that these messages need to be heard, and they may not have the millions of dollars of the giant companies behind them, but they're important, and they will transform the world in such a beautiful way.
Mm-hmm. So true. I mean, I love what you said about it's really a home for podcasters. I believe that Podopolo ultimately is a very big tent community. And everything's been architected to serve, to create a multiplier of value. And what I mean by that is, say that the very same algorithm that allows a listener or a viewer, because we're video enabled as well, to find the perfect podcast for them around what interests them and what inspires them, and be able to discover great podcasts without having to search. And it's spookily accurate, right? Because the algorithm is looking at what do you say you're interested in? What are you actually listening to? And what are your friends listening to? And what can we tell about your behavior over time that, oh, this other one that may be completely out of left field, but we think you'll love it because it has these things in common with these other podcasts that we know that you like. So that effortless discovery, that's effortless matchmaking. You flip that around. And what that means for the podcaster is we're sending them audiences that we know are pre-qualified to listen to their podcast, that they're already interested. And we're understanding through the AI, the audience overlaps between different podcasts. So Rob, if you got together with another podcaster and you both guested on each other's show, for instance, you would both grow as a result. Same thing for advertising. And all these different things. So in providing the listeners and viewers with a better experience, we're also providing the podcaster with a way to grow their audience, grow their engagement, because Podopolo is socially interactive, but also grow their revenue. And the data is a really big part of how we do this. And I look at all the other podcast apps out there. I mean, my own podcast is everywhere. I'm on Spotify and Apple and all the different places, as well as Podopolo. But none of those apps provide me as a podcaster with anything like the type of audience intelligence, we call it at Podopolo, that allows a podcaster to really know who's listening, know how people are listening, understand their listeners' wants, needs, challenges, behaviors, how to be more responsive in their content. That same aspect allows us to match that podcaster, no matter how small an audience, with topically relevant advertising that makes sense and adds value for their listeners. At the same time, that advertiser no longer has to play a numbers game, which they all play right now. You need 10,000 downloads or more an episode to be able to even qualify for any of the ad networks. Do you know that's less than like 1.5% of the entire global podcast market? So 98.5% of podcasters are left out of advertising.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me. So we're taking that whole market and saying, look, if you have 1,000 listeners, if we know who those listeners are, right, with not individually like their personal data or whatever, but we know who they are from a persona, an advertiser, location, all this sort of thing, we can match the right advertiser to those 1,000 people because we know that it's the advertiser's message is likely to convert with those people. So we're completely not just revolutionizing podcasting, but also advertising and also in fact, social media. As the app becomes more sophisticated on the social interactive front, it is a way to really take the conversation far beyond what we experience in our dialogue and social media, really using podcasting, which is in depth, intimate, real, as just a better grounding point for, conversation that actually adds value to society.
Yeah, I love podcasts. I listen to a lot of different podcasts. And the one thing that I really liked about Podopolo, and I fell in love with it even a long time ago before I was even involved with you, was there's content out there that I didn't know that I had access to listen to. And with the other platforms, you're limited to just randomly finding something, or actually you seeing it on another platform, then having to do a manual search for it. Like you did a search for,
you got to look for it.
If you did a search, you're never going to find Life Transformation Radio on Apple or Spotify. It's not going to happen unless you type in Life Transformation Radio.
Yeah.
Right. It's just not regular.
Yeah. And so much of podcasting is actually your friends recommending something to you, right? So, I say, hey, Rob, there's this podcast. You got to check it out. And maybe or maybe not, you'll remember the name of the podcast. Maybe that podcast is a half hour or an hour of your listening time. So you say, yeah, I'll get around to that. And then you forget, like you're busy. Everybody's really busy. So that's one of the reasons why Podopolo has innovated clips where anybody, a podcast host or a regular listener, can just take a snippet and a clip. It takes like less than 30 seconds, create this short clip and share it across all of Podopolo and coming soon also across all of social media. That way, it's easy to invest 30 seconds of your time to discover something.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you love it, you can go deeper. And it's an instant way. And again, it's just helping people save time, get value quickly, make it just an easier experience without having to do a lot of work. So we love things like that, like clips and playlists. We have a new thing, an up next playlist queue in your MyPods library, where you can select a whole series of episodes. Say you're about to go on a workout, go on a run, or go on a long drive or commute or whatever, and you want to set and forget your daily episode playlist across all the podcasts. That's super easy to do on Podopolo as well. So just another example of just making that listening experience better.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And I think the word transformation in regards to Podopolo is very appropriate, because it will transform the lives of the podcasters that are working in and day out. And podcasters, it's a lot of work. I mean, people think that they're making all this money, and majority of podcasters aren't making money. No. And what they're doing for the love of the content. I mean, they have to do their social media. They have to produce the show. They have to create the artwork. They have to work with guests. They have to come up with content. There's a lot of stuff there. And I think the transformation that really warms my heart, it makes me feel the most excited, is that all this work for these podcasters is going to be rewarded because of the algorithm. I have a friend that has a relationship and sex podcast, and she's invisible on the other platforms, and she's getting traction on Podopolo. Shocking. But apparently a lot of people like relationships and sex on Podopolo.
Well, but she was probably buried by all the other.
Exactly.
So Podopolo is a very personalized experience. Like if you look at anyone's, say if I looked at your home discover screen on on your version of Podopolo as opposed to mine or anybody else, it would be completely different because we all listen to different podcasts. Yeah. There are some though that overlap, and I discover a lot of podcasts and I say, oh my God, Rob's listening to that podcast. So I like Rob, so I'm going to check out that podcast. And that's another way that it just happens. And increasingly getting people together where that everyone's listening to the same podcast, you can really prompt really great conversation about that. And my vision for this is, I think podcasting has turned into, really an education medium as well. A lot of people listen to podcasts because they want to learn something. Well, what if you could meet other people who are trying to learn the same thing, or somebody else who's listening to a podcast that knows how to do something you don't? Maybe you want to hire them. Maybe you want to get hired by them. Maybe they're just a really great mentor for you or whatever. And you meet around a podcast. Talking about this, being able to take a learning and put it into action in your life, and to be able to carry on that conversation beyond the life of the podcast. And I think Podopolo really has that potential to be that in a really significant, scalable way. I think it's also a great place to cross-fertilize ideas because people react differently to what they hear, and to be able to elevate the conversation around that. Other people listen to podcasts just because they want to share a laugh. So, how can we make listening and viewing really interactive in a way that, to our mission to, elevate, empower, and entertain. And I think all those things are not at cross purposes.
Yeah. One of the fun features I like inside of Podopolo is you can look up the name of somebody and then you look up episodes in the search and it'll show all the podcasts that person's ever been on.
Yeah,
and
that's
it was
cool.
super
We're
fun.
We're going to turn that into the ability to make a playlist. So say, for instance, you love Malcolm
That's
Gladwell,
amazing.
right?
Yeah.
So you love Malcolm Gladwell, and you can go into search and you can search under the episodes in search rather than podcasts, and you immediately see every single episode. So if you went on there, Rob, you'd see all the podcasts you've been interviewed. I go on, I have my whole list of, like, I'll search for myself and see myself on your show. But one of the things that's coming really soon is the ability to create a playlist. So if you like Malcolm Gladwell and you just want to knock yourself out and everything that he's ever been on, you can do that. So we're always innovating all the time. We've got so many really exciting new features,
I love it. Yeah, I like the search because one of the things that I was sharing it all the time and get all my friends to download it. It's kind of fun. Is that, I'm like, do a search, and they looked up cookies. There are all these podcasts about cookies, and there was one, underwater basket weaving, whatever. But it's such a broad way because it limits us with the other platforms in that it's only they search by the name. You don't really get a search by the content. And the way that Podopolo has done it is really cool. And I think it's so powerful because you have an incredible podcast. People seem to like Life Transformation Radio, and we are not everything for everyone. So you have to have other podcasts, and there may be a conversation that we had on a podcast. Like, one of the things that I had a conversation the other day with a woman, and she does combo. It's ancient medicine. It's with the frog and you purge it's a spiritual purging. So a few people that are friends of mine that I've talked to, they've listened to it and they're like, wow, they went down this rabbit hole of trying to find other podcasts that talk about ancient medicine, whether it's DMT or ayahuasca. And it's just a way to really transform your consciousness for when since the Life Transformation Radio, but your consciousness, because you get exposed to the stuff you're supposed to get exposed for. So there's a bigger picture with Podopolo. I love the spiritual angle. I love the intensity of it and the intention of it, and to really transform the podcast listening experience. And on the other side, the podcaster experience, because as podcasters, we don't get treated really well unless we're a giant, Joe Rogan gets treated really well. Small podcasters, we just produce content, and a lot of us don't get the monetization. Everybody thinks they're making all this money. And with Podopolo, which I think is so great, and that's why it's a thrill for me to introduce podcasters to it, is that it's a way for them to generate revenue. Mm-hmm. And it's with the algorithm, it actually increases their listenership so they can make more revenue. So it's the rise the tides, so all the ships rise, as opposed to my ship's going to rise, yours is not. Effect. Yeah,
it is I think I called my podcast Wings of Inspired Business, because it was really around this whole idea of we all do better when we fly together, right? So lift as we climb. And I think that sensibility informs everything at Podopolo as well, is when we're really in it together and we're really helping each other. I mean, all the data bears out that when podcasters are cross-promoting one another, both podcasters do better. And that's where our data comes in, and really understanding those overlap audiences. Where is that effort going to be most effective? And I think your point too about people really wanting to dive deeper, like they hear one snippet on your podcast in, say, 30 minutes, 40 minutes or whatever, and that one snippet or clip on Podopolo allows them, if they're interested and they listen to that clip and they want to know more about that, the recommendation engine is going to make it effortless for them to find all the other things that are to do with that as well. And that's only going to get more and more sophisticated. I mean, the more people using it, the more sophisticated it gets. And we've been talking a lot about data. I just want to make sure that people understand too, that on Podopolo, we've managed to do that in such a way that absolutely sacrosanct protects people's privacy. We do not sell data. We don't harvest data. We don't share it with anybody. Everything's anonymized, and we really focus on protecting it to the point where if you have a podcast on a social app that you want to listen to, you can even listen incognito and it won't show up to your friends that you're listening to something. Like we have things like that in the app, a lot of really sophisticated features. And so when we're looking at the data from an advertiser perspective or to help podcasters really understand who their audiences are, it's all grouped into personas and avatars and composites so that everybody's data is 100% protected. And moreover, unlike Facebook, we don't have to follow everybody all across the internet to be able to do this. We really have elevated this in a way of how can we be social? How can we be personalized while still protecting people's privacy?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that there's a consciousness behind Podopolo that when people interact with Podopolo, they will feel it because it's a scrappy bunch.
Yeah, we are.
We're scrappy. Yeah, we're scrappy. But I think there's a consciousness of really that Podopolo is a lot bigger than all of us. And that it really is going to transform and disrupt the industry of how people listen to podcasts and how they interact. You know, one of the cool things is you have the ability, and you can do this. You can send messages to me on the Podopolo app. You can send messages to Melinda, and you can say you like the episode. I also have the ability to do a live chat at different times. It's a lot of interactivity, and that's one of the things I love about Podopolo. And then in podcasting, there's not a lot of two-way communication. There's just one way. And I will say that people are very persistent and they will find a way to contact me, which I think is really fun. But with Podopolo, it makes it really, really easy, and it creates communities around topics. And it's funny because there are topics of podcasts that I've discovered in Podopolo that I didn't even know there was a podcast about. And I think that's fascinating because there's so much content out there and there's so many people working so hard and giving their heart and their soul and just everything they have to create this content for you. And you'll be able to find it in Podopolo. And I think that's a beautiful thing because, you know, speaking of like ayahuasca, if you're hearing about ayahuasca right now, it's interesting because that may trigger something in you because things come across your path at the right time. And it's just a beautiful thing. I've discovered some really incredible messages on Podopolo. One is, I'm trying to think of, Sacagawea. So there's a podcast. It's an audio drama on Sacagawea, and it's fascinating. And I learned so much. You know, the Indian Sacagawea. Imagine dying. If I died today, I don't think in 250 years you'd be talking about me. I just don't. I mean, I try to make an impact. You know, you're making an impact, but are people going to be talking about us in 250 years? They talk about her still. And it's fascinating. So that was discovered on Podopolo. It's, you know, so that's one of the cool things I love about it, in that you discover information that you didn't know that you didn't know. And I just kind of say, well, the universe thought it was time for me to learn about this stuff.
Yeah, 100%. We're always about making that easy. And of course, we want people's feedback. I mean, so we really want to create, and I think we have, a really safe container for people to be able to say, hey, look, I really think you should do this differently, or have you thought about this feature, or, any of those things, because we really believe in co-creating with our customers and really, creating safe space, because that's really the root of community, is being able to, a genuine one, right? Is being able to have that trusted connection, not just banal connection, but really trusted connection. And that's really what we're about. And, where we're going increasingly with everybody in this really big tent. But Rob, it's such a delight, to work with you. It's amazing. I've known you for a while, and to have you come on board on the company and be our podcast evangelist is amazing, because you know just in your heart exactly what it takes for podcasters to succeed, and having your insights and the insights of all the podcasters, feed through to our engineering team and our product team, and as we grow out other parts of the business, is just invaluable. And did I mention, Podopolo's hiring?
There you go.
We need a lot of people, So stay in touch with us. Keep checking our website. We got a whole marketing team and sales team and more engineers to hire and all kinds of things. So really looking for people who want to, really who love this journey. I mean, yeah, it's a journey of innovation but also a lot of fun and creativity and inspiration. So
and really cool people. I will have to say, really cool people. The one question I want to ask you, and I like to ask this, is it's 2022. Mm-hmm. October 2023 is right around the corner, which is crazy. So look in your crystal ball and 5 years from now, what if you're on Life Transformation Radio and I'm saying, hey, so I haven't talked to you in 5 years, Melinda, what's going on? So where are things with you in 5 years?
Oh gosh. Well, I know with Podopolo, it'll be a multi-billion-dollar company. Of that, I have no doubt. I think we're going to seize market and very, very quickly. As for me, I'm always a mission-driven entrepreneur. So I am just going to be doing good. I have all kinds of intentions beyond Podopolo. I know how hard it's been for me as a female founder to raise venture capital. A number that hasn't changed in 2 decades, only getting 2% of the venture money. And these are for businesses that happen to be run by females that have the potential to be truly scalable billion-dollar companies. So that number hasn't moved. And I set an intention that I would be part of the solution to that by investing at least $10 million in female-founded companies. So 5 years from now, hopefully some of that money I've done well enough through Podopolo to plow that back into reinvesting in other women to make their journey maybe a little easier than mine in that respect. So that would be one thing. And I know that let's see, 5 years from now, it's such a great question. I think I'll just be in immense gratitude because I'll be, as I am already, I'm already in gratitude for things that haven't even transpired yet, but I know they are, of all the lives that we've empowered, all the people that we have helped in whatever way, all the podcasters who are making money from their podcast where they weren't before, or at least, doing better, all the transformation that has happened as a result of that, all the ways that lives have been improved. And Podopolo also has a social impact mission. So, it's a carbon neutral company. It will have Podopolo itself as an entity, as well as me personally, will have contributed in a pretty epic way, I think, towards a lot of the world's most pressing challenges, be they climate change or education or inequality or poverty. So I think there's a lot possible. I know that I will be very, very happy to have achieved my mission.
That's awesome. Melinda, thank you so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule. Seriously, I know because I can see your calendar, for being here today on Life Transformation Radio.
Oh, it was so much fun, Rob. Thank you so much.
And if you want to listen and engage with Life Transformation Radio with me, Rob Actis, hey, we can do it right on Podopolo. Download the app. It's podopolo.com. Tell them Mr. Action sent you. It's podopolo.com. And thank you so much for your support and taking the time out of your busy and precious day to listen to Life Transformation Radio. I so appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me, along with my very special guest, to touch your heart, move your soul, and inspire you to live a life of transformation. I'm Rob Actis. Until next time.
This is Life Transformation Radio. Download complete.